David Anderson has become synonymous with global black wealth. Whether he's shaping policies at the World Economic Forum, playing key roles within political circles on both sides, mastering the art of building unshakable wealth on an international scale, or breaking down barriers so that black men around the world can win. David is the world's best kept financial secret weapon. From the ghettos of Southside Chicago to the Obama White House, to the homes of billionaire moguls, David's receipts stretch well beyond million-dollar bank accounts, African royal families, or celebrity inner circles.
But I believe that they did something that all of us can do.
David's true gift is in single-handedly positioning everyday brothers to become global millionaires. Why? Because it's about damn time we own what's ours and have a real seat at the table. Money, power, respect.
All right, welcome. First off, thank you for the online audience, also our audience here at DuSable. We are live at the historic DuSable Museum of African American History. For those that do not know, from around the world and around the country, you are now aware of what DuSable is. On this wonderful Juneteenth celebration day, we are at a place where, historically it was not. I always talk about how we have to own our own history. We have to own our own story. We have to own those narratives. And so a man by Baptiste DuSable founded the city of Chicago, a Haitian man. And it wasn't until about 40, 50 years ago that he started to be recognized for his contribution in founding the city and establishing it here in the United States. And so on this Juneteenth day, Freedom Day, we are excited about the fact that we get a chance to not only be in a place of freedom within ourselves, but also embrace a wonderful Smithsonian affiliate, as well as historical land site here in Chicago. Want to go through a couple things as we get ready to talk about economics. As you guys know, my goal is to empower Black men around the world and the diaspora. Number one, right, is a psychological freedom. Number two is economic and financial freedom. What does that mean? Financial freedom is being able to buy whatever you want, right? It's having purchasing power. Economic freedom is when you actually own the things that people buy, right? You own the stuff that people buy. And so those are two different things. But lastly is that how do you create wealth creation for actually 7 generations, right? How do you set up things in your life where the next generation is not starting from zero, right? Or starting from scratch, or just a little ahead of you? How do you set it up where the next generation, through teaching, through structures, are actually further ahead of you, but they can actually excel from what you left and what you did in your life? So today we're going to do more of a little bit of a TED Talk style, right? We have audience as well as the audience online, a little bit different style. And so I know that those that come in the room, a little bit different today, Juneteenth celebration. We're not going to have as much chat box back and forth and stuff like that. We're going to make this a TEDx, and I'm going to educate on a couple different people and figures. I would call them Juneteenth figures, right? People that we should know economically from the Juneteenth perspective and what they did to lead us into a better tomorrow and into prosperity. So we're going to go through that. And so first, I want to talk about the history, historical figure. Then I'm going to go into a more recent historical figure, and then I'm going to go into the present now, people now who are making economic inroads for all of us to be able to not only admire but also celebrate for our history. So with that, we're going to go into it. So the first person we're going to go into today is a person that some people know, not many people actually probably even understand who actually she is. We're going to go through that and what she did for us as a people to move forward. But we're going to talk about the magnificent, amazing Mary Ellen Pleasant. All right, Mary Ellen Pleasant. Now, many people have not heard of Mary before, nor should you have in many respects, right? because many of us, we did not necessarily, again, we didn't control this narrative. We didn't control this history. And so I want to talk about Mary because Mary is a very phenomenal person. Remember, I've always said that one of the principles that we have to follow as many times in the diaspora, because we are, particularly in the diaspora, those outside of Africa, we are in countries that are not built for us, right? We are in places that were built for certain constituencies, and we've had to essentially adopt. Okay, we've had to adopt ourselves. We've had to, make a place for ourselves inside of these countries, whether it's the United States, Brazil. There's about 30 million of us in Brazil. The United Kingdom, there's about 7 million of us there, or Canada, or in parts of the Caribbean. So we've had to essentially adopt ourselves in these countries, in the diaspora, okay? But Mary Ellen Pleasant is a pretty phenomenal figure, and I know I have a lot of men examples, but I wanted to use her because we don't hear about her a lot. So let me tell you a story real quick, right? So you can be inspired. So imagine you're in the 1800s and slavery is full throttle. There's some debates in the newspapers. There's people that are, abolitionists exist. You have the North and South debates about it. You would liken, slavery to a topic of, kitchen discussion, right? Slavery was although it was inhumane, although it was, something that was an atrocity, the reality is that most people in America had not seen slavery, right? Like really, really seen it. Most people did not understand slavery. Matter of fact, in many respects, slavery in the 1800s was pretty much reduced to a topic of being indentured servitude, okay? So it was like, it's not that bad, right? It's, they are, indentured servants. They are essentially people that, who came over to work, and now they're, essentially in the South, and they work for their employer, right? That was the narrative coming out of the South, okay? And so, slavery itself, right, or indentured servitude, as some would call it, was essentially this, what I call this table topic discussion that was discussed for, intellectual delight, okay? Well, Mary Ellen Pleasant, oh my gosh, so this lady, so imagine 1850s, 1840s, she travels west. So she, was born obviously in the South and learned how to cook, and also how to be a cook and also do housework, as many Black women and African women learned how to do during that time. So she decided to venture west because she heard of new lands, new opportunities that were coming up. And so she started to venture west until she got to California, okay? She got to California. And in California, she started to realize from her experience, having worked in what she would consider people of wealth in their houses, that sometimes that if you are around the table, right, the crumbs that fall from the table can be something of value. I like to say, all the time is that, hey, if you're sitting around a bunch of, broke people, the crumbs that fall from the table are going to be debt. If you're sitting around people who are, thousandaires, you're going to get crumbs of a couple hundred. If you're sitting around millionaires, you're going to get crumbs of a couple thousand. If you're sitting around billionaires, well, you just might get some crumbs of a couple million, right? And so she understood this principle, and she writes about this. So she goes west. She connects with a family and actually folks who are helping dream up the West, right? We kind of forget that, at one point, even where I stand now in Chicago, Chicago was actually considered the West of the United States. Illinois itself was considered the most western part, right, of the United States. And so as they built out areas of, Iowa and going west to Colorado and California, these were new frontiers and new territories. So Mary, good old Mary, goes west and says, you know what? I'm going to use my position as a cook, my position as a house cleaner, to essentially gather information on what's happening in this state of this new state, California, so that I can figure out how to maneuver. And what she did was pretty phenomenal. Not only was she able to get the information, but she also applied it. She started to understand the gold game. So she started to buy and sell gold nuggets. She started to understand actually banking. I'll go into something she did that was pretty incredible. She started to understand real estate, right? And so she started to, with partnerships with, at the time, right, white men, started to purchase, actually a black woman in the 1800s, started to purchase real estate in the state of California. Not only did she do that, but she actually was one of the initial investors and founders, which is a history that we don't talk about and many don't know, one of the initial investors in Wells Fargo, right? And so when you think about that in the 1800s, talk about being able to, break down barriers, right? Do things that you never thought possible. Mary Ellen Pleasant is one of those heroes that we stand on her shoulders. Now, again, this comes back to Juneteenth, because the reason why I talk about wealth creation for 7 generations, that although because Mary did all these incredible exploits, although she did all these incredible things, she had an incredible problem. Towards the end of her life, because a lot of things she owned, right, she could not own in her name, right, because of the laws that existed. Towards the end of her life, one of her partner's spouses, after he died, actually ended up having to take a lot of her wealth from her, right? And I don't tell that story to give a sad ending, but I say that to go to the point of that we live now in the day and time, brothers and sisters, where we actually get to own the things that we have and we get to put our names on it. So how dare we, right, not become a participant in owning our land, okay, in owning our communities, right, in owning our assets. And so it is imperative upon us, because of a sister like Mary Ellen Pleasant, who decided to go the distance, although she did not have as much opportunity as we have today, right? And she actually during her lifetime, funded a lot of the abolitionist movement, from Harriet Tubman to Frederick Douglass. She was the quiet funder behind many of the freedom fighters that went forward today. And so we ought to do the same. I'm going to talk about somebody else real quickly here, right? So Mary, look her up. If you don't know her, please look her up. She's phenomenal. She's what I will call one of those silent heroes in history that we do not talk about enough. Thank you, Mary, for all your contribution. All right, we're going to talk about another person. Again, we're going to go back a little bit further. I want to go back further, right, in history, about a brother named Mansa Musa. Now, in recent history, we've started to hear more about this figure and more about what he did, right, for Black and African people. Today is Freedom Day, right? Today is Freedom Day, so we're going to talk about figures that helped us get to freedom. And so Mansa Musa, phenomenal king, ruler of the Mali Empire, right? As we know, Mali was over West Africa and part of Central Africa, but he did something that what I would deem as really brought out about the real power of what we had as Africans and also as Black people. Mansa Musa today, even today, they consider him the richest man that has ever, again, I want to say that, right? He is considered the richest man that has ever. I know Jeff Bezos got a bag. I know Bill Gates has done pretty well. I know that, you got a lot of men around the world that have done a lot, but has ever lived and walked the earth, the richest man is Mansa Musa, not King Solomon, who I love his writings, phenomenal king, right? You can talk about Alexander the Great, who I know conquered many lands. We can talk about Mao over in China, great ruler. But Mansa Musa, as we know, as historians know today, was the richest man that ever touched the earth. His wealth, as we know it today, would be somewhere around $400 to $500 billion. Matter of fact, this man was so wealthy that his quote unquote indentured servants and slaves and those that worked for him, they were dressed in silk and fine linens and such. A matter of fact, the man was so phenomenal that he went on a journey, right, across the African continent. I want you to imagine this, okay? I want you to understand how big the continent of Africa is. I don't have a picture up there yet, right? But I want you to imagine the continent of Africa. You can fit all of Europe. You can fit the US. You can fit China. You can fit Brazil. You can fit about 35% of the world can fit inside the continent of Africa. So I want you to imagine walking, for those in the US, I want you to imagine walking from California to New York. Imagine that walk and that journey, okay? Well, Mansa Musa did a longer journey than that. He went from what I consider California, right, up to somewhere in, Ray, North Ontario, okay? He went on a journey, and they say they don't know the exact numbers, but it was thousands of people that went with him on this journey. Look, it was so many people that people from Europe and Asia, everyone started to hear about this journey, because along the journey, guess what the man was giving out? He was giving out gold. A matter of fact, he gave away so much gold when he got to Egypt. Okay, imagine coming from Ghana or West Africa to Egypt. When he got to Egypt, he actually gave away so much gold that the gold market crashed. Gold became worthless because he had given away so much gold in his journey that he had to circle back to Egypt, right? And actually buy the gold back to stabilize the economy. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that sounds like, right, the United States. It sounds like a government, right? That you are able to control markets and control the economies because of the wealth that he had. And this man has not been given enough credit throughout history. He is one of our quiet and unsung heroes. But what he did in the consciousness of the world is that the rest of the world during that time period started to understand the wealth, the influence, and the power, right, of the African. Exactly what existed. And mind you, he didn't steal the gold, okay? He did not have to have slaves to get the gold or his wealth. He did not have to colonize. He did not have to proliferate, okay? There were battles, obviously, and normal kingdom stuff, but he got this because of the wealth and the trading that they did, right, within the Mali kingdom. He is somebody today that we ought to not only recognize, but also, in many ways, we stand on the shoulders of a man like Mansa Musa, right? So look him up, put him in your book so that you understand who he is and what he has done for Black people, but also African Americans and all those around the world, okay? All right. The last thing I want to talk about today is where we are today. Okay, we're going to put a picture up of just, a group of us today. Where we are today is very interesting because unlike Mary Pleasant, where there are very clear barriers, right? She understood the barriers that existed. She could not own the land. She could not have her name on the paperwork to invest. She could not actually own the business in many ways. And although she was a millionaire many times, before Madam C.J. Walker, before Booker T. Washington, there was Mary Pleasant. But the barriers were very visible that existed, right? The barriers were very much something that was more tangible and understood. And we don't live in a time like Mansa Musa where many of us live in our own land. We live back home on the continent, and we control our own soil, and we control our own government. And so how must we move moving forward as we celebrate Juneteenth, a day that was given to us as emancipation, but because of the lack of communication and barriers, we were not told that we were free until 2.5 years later, right? I believe that now we live in a time where for us as a people, okay, it is time for us to look at ourselves, okay, for what we are trying to do. Did you not know that today, I'm just going to speak on African Americans. Today, African Americans, our economy is almost the same size economy as Canada. Just the collective purchasing power of the African American today, our purchasing power, is equivalent to the country, okay, of Canada. So what I believe today is that the thing that we have today is that today, while many of grandparents and great-grandparents had what I call a freedom struggle, they had to fight to go to the same bank. They had to struggle to sit in the same seat. They had to, tear down things in order to get the same job. What I believe today is that instead of now looking for many of the institutions that have ostracized us, the power that we have to possess is that we have to now create our own institutions, our own power, and look internally and create the institution and economic wealth that we need for ourselves. What do I mean by this? What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that today, as you see around the world, right, whether it's Brazil, China, the BRICS nations, right, who are creating their own currency, whether or not it's Russia or all the international things we hear about, the time of our people being looked at as, hey, we're going to help you out, okay? Hey, oh, that's been really bad. Let us do something nice for you, right? Instead of us now being the people that get the crumbs at the table, we have to start to create our own table so that we can sit at the table. Let me break this down some more. What do I mean by that? You've heard the saying before that if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. And then we say, hey, don't give him a fish. Let's teach him how to fish. If we teach him how to fish, man, he'll eat for his lifetime. Well, I want to take that saying one step further, that we're not just going to give away fish anymore. And I believe that teaching fish, just teaching you how to fish, is a good start. It's phenomenal. But we cannot stop there. I believe that the time now and where we're moving forward is not to just give a fish or teach a fish, but we have to teach our children and our children's children how to own the pond that people fish in. You have to teach how to own the pond, because once you own the pond, you can now be the teachers of fish in your own pond. We create our own table. We create our own chairs. And so now we have economic independence, but also economic certainty as we move forward throughout generations. What has kept us back, I believe, as I look at and analyze all the different institutions, is that we did very well with HBCUs and educational institutions. Education is a bedrock, right, to a community. But now we have to have staples in economic institutions that allow us to thrive, not just to survive, but to thrive. And that is in areas. I want to put this up here if you can for me. My crew backstage will put this up. Is we talked about economic access. So we have to make sure that we own the banks that we bank with, right? Or participate in those banks. We have to own the healthcare that exists in our communities. We cannot expect other people to understand the things that we go through as a people from everything that we have. I heard a study recently, they're kind of throwing away BMI. How many grew up with the whole BMI? You went to the doctor and they talked about your BMI. And now they're saying, oh, we're sorry. Like, BMI is kind of racist, right? Because as you know, as African people and African Americans, right, that, look, they would consider me necessarily obese, right? But I know my bone structure, my muscle tone, my structure, I'm not obese. But they built a system that wasn't necessarily for us. So we have to own our healthcare. The third thing we have to own is we have to own our propaganda and our education, okay? I love today that because of what I call the decentralization of media that's happening, right? I went on a tour and I see so much independent Black media that exists today across podcasts, across Facebook groups, across Instagram. I mean, we have so much independent Black media. I was very happy to hear Our brother Tyler Perry, right? For many of us here in Chicago, we remember when he was just doing the chicken circuit down at the Regal and having a bunch of plays that made us laugh and enjoy God. How many remember that, right? And now today, the brother's in a position where he just purchased, bought back BET from Viacom, but also just purchased VH1, right? Our ability to control the propaganda in our media is going to be paramount for us to move forward, all right? The other thing I want to speak about is this, and I want to speak to the men, and I want to speak to those who are fathers, okay? I sent out a message yesterday about this, okay, in celebration of Father's Day. Look, I stand on the shoulders of the men in my life. My father came from Mississippi. My grandfather, he came from Louisiana. My father's father fought in World War II and went back to Mississippi to be a sharecropper and obviously dehumanized. But I think there's something that I learned from those men that in our lives, in my life, is that men now in America, around the world, if you're sitting here today, as men, we have to take control of our children. Now, I know that, look, family structures and how things are set up in the world today look very different. But despite the structure, despite the situation, or whatever exists, we have to take control of our children. Why? Studies have shown that children get their self-esteem. They may get their love and their nurturing from their mother, but they get their confidence, their self-esteem, and their identity from their father. And it's time for us not only to take back our children, but to take back and teach them their legacy. Let's teach them their ancestry, okay? Let's teach them what they need to know so that they can understand who they are as a people. The next generation is waiting on us to teach them who they are. They need to understand who Mary Pleasant is. They need to understand who Mansa Musa is. They need to understand who these figures are that, hey, you know, I'm excited. I actually had the chance to work for Barack Obama at the White House. Amazing man. I love what he's done for the image and for the country. But he stands on the shoulders of those that went before him, W.E.B. Du Bois. He stands on the shoulders of Frederick Douglass. And so if we don't take back our media, our propaganda, our institutions, but also most importantly, we have to take back our children, to take our children and send them into institutions that are not necessarily built for us. And we expect those institutions to educate our children on how to be confident as an African or as a Black person is foolish and naive. It is not about the fact that is poison, but we also know intentionality is everything. So if the institutions are not intentionally raising our children to understand who they are, how will they know who they are and whose they are if the men in their lives does not speak into them? Whether it's an affirmation, whether it is a talk, you pull them to the side, whether it is a tradition that you have, I guarantee you having our children and taking back our children is the most important thing. But look, I am so excited. Thank you, DuSable Museum. Thank you to all the Black men who pulled in today from around the world. And thank you to all of those who fought for freedom, that I could stand on this stage today and speak to you and say to you, hey, look, as we celebrate Juneteenth, I want us all to go to the top. Why? Because the bottom is just way too crowded. Man, I appreciate everybody today, and thank you for having me.